There are certain memories that do not arrive as single images, but as entire atmospheres. The smell of warm pavement after rain, the sound of distant voices drifting across an estate at dusk, the feeling that the day was wide open and that nobody was counting the minutes. Growing up in Britain during the 1970s did not feel extraordinary at the time. It simply felt like childhood. Only later did it become clear how different it was and how quietly it shaped the people who lived it. This was not a perfect childhood, and it was not the same for everyone, but it was built on a particular balance of freedom, expectation, and trust that feels increasingly unfamiliar today. Not because the world was safer, kinder, or simpler in every way, but because children were allowed to exist within it with fewer layers of supervision and fewer explanations. Number 1. A childhood without constant supervision. In the 1970s, adults were present in children's lives without hovering over them. Parents knew roughly where their children were, but not precisely what they were doing every minute of the day. This absence was not neglect, but assumption. It was understood that children would occupy themselves, find their way, and return when they were hungry or tired. You might leave the house in the morning with only a vague instruction to be back by tea, and no one found that unusual. The idea that a child required constant observation would have felt excessive, even insulting. Independence was not something to be earned later. It was expected early. That expectation shaped how children saw themselves. They learned, almost unconsciously, that they were capable. Number 2. Walking everywhere without being watched. Walking was how childhood unfolded. To school, to friends' houses, to the corner shop, to nowhere in particular. Shoes wore thin at the heels. Shortcuts were discovered, claimed, and remembered. There was pride in knowing the quickest route, the quiet alley, the safe crossing. No one checked locations. No one sent messages. If you were late, you were late. If you were early, you waited. Walking alone was not considered risky, but normal, and with it came a quiet confidence that grew with each familiar journey. Those walks were lessons in awareness, patience, and self-reliance. They were also moments of privacy, stretches of the day that belonged entirely to the child walking them. Number 3. Days that seemed to last forever. Time moved differently then, not because clocks ran slower, but because there was nothing constantly dividing attention. Without screens, notifications, or schedules filling every gap, hours stretched. Mornings blended into afternoons. Summer days felt almost endless. Boredom existed, but it was not treated as an emergency. It was something to sit with until it turned into invention. Games emerged, dissolved, and reformed. Conversations drifted. Silence was common. Looking back, many remember not specific activities, but the feeling of having time itself on their side. That sense of spaciousness is difficult to recreate once it is gone. Number 4. Playing outside until the light disappeared. The boundary between day and night was not marked by clocks or messages, but by light. Street lamps flickering on signaled the slow end of play. Mothers calling from doorways carried further than any ringtone. Children played in groups that shifted naturally, expanding and shrinking as others joined or drifted away. Streets became football pitches, obstacle courses, imaginary worlds. There was no need to organize these games, they simply happened. Outside was where childhood lived. Indoors was for meals, sleep, and bad weather. That balance gave children a sense of territory that felt both vast and familiar. Number 5. Learning limits through mistakes, not warnings. Children in the 1970s learned by doing and often by failing. Knees were scraped, arguments flared and fizzled out. Boundaries were discovered by crossing them, not by being endlessly reminded they existed. Adults intervened when necessary, but not preemptively. Risk was part of growing, not something to be eliminated entirely. This did not make children fearless, but it taught them judgment. Mistakes were absorbed into experience, not amplified into trauma. The world taught lessons directly, and children were trusted to listen. Number 6. A world where adults didn't constantly listen in. Children had their own spaces, both physical and conversational. They spoke freely among themselves, inventing language, rules, and hierarchies without adult oversight. Adults were nearby, but not embedded in every exchange. Privacy existed, even in small houses. Bedrooms were shared, but thoughts were personal. This separation allowed children to experiment with identity away from adult expectations. Being overheard was the exception, not the rule. And that made growing up feel like something you owned, rather than something performed. Number 7. Fear existed, but it didn't define childhood. Fear was present in the 1970s, but it did not dominate childhood in the way it often does now. Children knew there were dangers, but those dangers were specific, local, and rarely abstract. They were learned through experience or quiet instruction, not through constant repetition. News arrived slowly, usually filtered through adult conversation or the evening television, and much of it never reached children directly. The world did not feel like something that needed to be survived, but something that could be navigated. This mattered more than we realized at the time. It allowed curiosity to exist without anxiety always trailing behind it. Children explored not because they were unaware of risk, but because risk had not been inflated into something omnipresent. Number 8. Community watching quietly from a distance. Although children often appeared unsupervised, they were rarely unseen. Neighbors noticed patterns, shopkeepers recognized faces. Other parents paid attention without making a display of it. This quiet observation created a web of informal protection. Adults did not interfere unless necessary, but they were aware. Responsibility was shared without being spoken aloud. It was not perfect, but it worked. Freedom existed within a collective understanding that children belonged to everyone, and that watching out for them was part of everyday life. Number 9. Treating independence as something to grow into. Independence in the 1970s was not granted all at once. It came gradually in small, manageable steps. A short walk alone became a longer one. Being trusted with a message or an errand marked a quiet milestone. Each responsibility carried meaning. It signaled belief. Children sensed that belief and often rose to meet it. Being trusted felt like recognition, not pressure. This process created self-confidence that was built slowly and securely. Independence was not framed as rebellion, but as growth. Number 10. Discipline that felt firm but predictable. Rules were clear and rarely debated. Discipline existed, and it was enforced without long explanations. Children might not have liked it, but they understood it. That predictability mattered. Boundaries did not shift daily. Consequences were consistent. Authority did not apologize for itself. Even when discipline felt strict, it provided structure. Children knew where they stood, and that clarity offered a strange kind of comfort. Number 11. The absence of constant entertainment. Entertainment was not something that followed children everywhere. There were toys, books, and games, but they did not arrive endlessly or automatically. Large portions of childhood involved filling time creatively. A stick became a sword. A pavement became a racetrack. Imagination did the work that technology now performs. This absence did not feel like lack, it felt normal. And from it came creativity that required no instruction and no permission. Number 12. Knowing the world without being overwhelmed by it. Children learned about the world slowly. Adult problems were not laid out in front of them daily. News belonged to grown-ups, and explanations arrived when questions were asked. This gradual exposure allowed children to remain children. Understanding developed alongside emotional readiness. The world was introduced in pieces, not as a flood. That pacing mattered more than we realized at the time. Number 13. The quiet confidence this childhood created. Many who grew up in the 1970s carry a certain steadiness into adulthood. A belief that problems can be solved, that time can be endured, that being alone is not something to fear. This confidence was never taught directly. It emerged from repetition, from being trusted, from discovering again and again that mistakes could be survived. It is subtle but deeply rooted and often invisible even to those who possess it. Number 14. What this childhood didn't give everyone. Not every child was safe. Not every home was kind. Freedom could sometimes feel like abandonment, and independence could shade into loneliness. It is important to acknowledge this honestly. Nostalgia should not erase hardship, but neither should hardship erase what worked for many. Both realities existed, often at the same time, within the same streets and schools. Number 15. Why this childhood still matters now. This is not a call to recreate the past, but an invitation to remember what children are capable of when they are trusted. The 1970s allowed room for growth without constant correction. Perhaps what we miss is not the decade itself, but the confidence it placed in childhood. The childhood Britain gave in the 1970s was not flawless, but it was spacious, trusting, and quietly formative. It allowed children to grow into themselves without constant commentary or correction, and that may be why so many who lived it still recognize its shape, even now, long after the streets grew quieter and the days began to move faster.